I didn't bother with the elevator. The penthouse was only 3 floors up from the private garage, and I needed the walk to steady my breathing. I ditched the gala at the Met after the third round of fake smiles. Charity felt obscene when I knew exactly where Julian's money was going, and it wasn't to pediatric cancer research. I swiped my key fob, pushed the door open, and heard her laugh before I saw her. That high, glass-breaking giggle that sounds like it's been engineered for Instagram reels. Relax, babe. She's not coming back till midnight, Sienna was saying, probably later, knowing her. Julian didn't respond right away. I stepped into the living room. He was sprawled on the sectional, tie loosened, whiskey in one hand. Sienna was curled into his side, wearing my cashmere wrap and absolutely nothing else I could see. She had her feet up on the coffee table, toes painted some neon shade that definitely wasn't my rotation. My champagne flute baccarat, not that she'd know, was balanced on her knee. Julian finally looked at me. No surprise, no guilt, just that lazy half-smirk he used when he wanted to remind me he owned the room. "Claire," he said, like he was greeting a junior analyst who'd interrupted a meeting. "Didn't expect you." "Clearly," I said. I set my clutch on the console and unclipped my earrings. "Sienna, didn't expect you either." She tilted her head, all practiced innocence. "Julian said it was okay. We were just celebrating." "Celebrating what?" I asked. Julian took a slow sip of whiskey. "Us. The future." Sienna grinned. "He told me you were all about the spreadsheets." "Claire, but this city, it runs on vibes, on presence. You should try it sometime." I didn't rise to it. I'd learned a long time ago that the best way to win an argument in this world was to act like you hadn't noticed there was one. "You're staying, then?" I asked Julian. "Indefinitely," he said. "Sienna understands ambition, unlike some people." I nodded once. "Fine. Just don't touch the East Wing accounts. I've got a liquidity report due Monday." Sienna laughed again. "God, you're so predictable. Always the banker." I turned and walked upstairs. Behind me, Julian's voice followed. "See? Cold. No wonder I stopped coming home early." In the bedroom, I locked the door and opened the hidden partition on the Mac. The encryption key was muscle memory by now. 3 months ago, when I'd noticed Julian's expense reports didn't match his calendar, I'd started building an exit strategy. Not a divorce, not yet. A corporate decoupling. Whitmore Global Holdings was his ego, his identity, and his leverage. If I wanted out, I'd take the leverage with me. I pulled up the shell company docs. Bennett Shaw Holdings. Dormant since incorporation, but ready. I scrolled through the voting share transfers I'd seeded last quarter under the guise of estate planning. 22% of WGH's liquid assets already rerouted into escrow. Enough to trigger a board-level earthquake if I moved it. I dialed Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. "Claire, it's after 10. Activate the shell," I said, and pull the buyer list for the East Division. I want soft whispers on the street by morning. Marcus exhaled hard. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." "Claire, if you do this, you're burning the marriage and the brand in one move." "Exactly," I said. "Julian wants to play house with his Instagram muse? Fine. But he's not playing with my assets while he does it. You know he'll fight you. Let him." I said. "He won't have the votes." Marcus was quiet for a beat. Then, "You've already moved the shares, haven't you?" "Enough," I said. "Get me Langford Capital's number and Shaw Equity. I want both at the table by Wednesday." "Christ," Marcus muttered. "You've been planning this longer than I thought." "I plan everything," I said. "That's why I'm still in the game." Downstairs, I heard Sienna's voice rise. Something about finally getting what she deserves. Julian's low rumble followed, too muffled to make out. I closed the laptop and stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. Somewhere down there, traders were already asleep, unaware that by sunrise, the name Whitmore would mean something very different. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Don't be petty. Claire, we'll talk tomorrow. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the pre-drafted press leak to my contact at Dealbook. It was a single line. Whitmore Global Holdings exploring strategic alternatives for East Division. By the time I went back downstairs, Julian and Sienna were still on the couch. She was scrolling her phone, laughing at something. Julian glanced up as I passed through the living room. "You're really going to ignore us all night?" he asked. I stopped, looked at him, then at her. "I'm not ignoring you. I'm prioritizing. There's a difference." Sienna rolled her eyes. "Prioritizing what?" "Your 401k, among other things." I said, "Enjoy the penthouse." Sienna, "Hope you like the view. It's about to change." Julian frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and checked my watch. Midnight. Right on schedule. My phone lit up again. "Marcus, whispers have started. Langford's people are asking questions." I typed back, "Let them ask." "And Marcus, make sure the escrow closes by Thursday. No exceptions." Upstairs, I heard Sienna's voice again. "Louder this time, babe. Your wife's being so extra right now." Julian's reply was muffled, but I caught the word control. Control. That was always his favorite word. He'd controlled the board, the brand, the narrative. Even our marriage had been a controlled environment until tonight. I opened my laptop again and pulled up the prenuptial agreement. I'd rewritten the asset division clause 2 years ago, right after I caught the first whiff of perfume that wasn't mine. At the time, Julian had laughed it off as standard housekeeping. Now it would be the chain around his neck. Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. Heard WGH might be shopping the East Division. True? I smiled. The sharks were circling already. I replied, "Depends who's buying." Then I set the phone down and leaned back. Downstairs, Sienna's laugh echoed up the stairs, bright, careless, stupid. Julian's voice followed, sharper now. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was familiar. Irritation, the first crack in the facade. I closed my eyes and ran through the timeline. By morning, the rumors would be loud enough that Julian couldn't ignore them. By Wednesday, I'd have 2 buyers in a room, bidding against each other. By Friday, the board would be forced to vote. And by this time next week, Julian Whitmore would walk into his own headquarters and realize he didn't own it anymore. Sienna would figure it out eventually, probably when the Amex got declined. Julian would figure it out when the locks changed. But by then, it wouldn't matter. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Julian appeared in the doorway, still holding his whiskey. "You're really doing this?" he said. Not a question. "Doing what?" I asked. "This cold act, this silence. You think it makes you powerful?" I looked at him, really looked, for the first time in years. He seemed smaller, not the CEO, just a man who'd overplayed his hand. "I don't think it makes me powerful, Julian," I said. "I know it does." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I heard him go back downstairs, heard Sienna ask what was wrong, heard him snap at her to shut up. I went back to my laptop. Another message from Marcus. "Langford wants a meeting. Shaw's people are circling. We need a location." I typed, "Four Seasons, private dining, Wednesday, noon." Then I added, "And Marcus, make sure Sienna's name is on the guest list for the annual shareholders meeting next month. I want her front and center when the votes are counted." I hit send and leaned back. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, the penthouse was quiet except for the occasional laugh from downstairs, Sienna's, now strained. Julian's voice, lower, tighter. I checked the time. 12:47 a.m. The first wave of headlines would hit the pre-market briefings in 5 hours. Julian would wake up to a different world. I closed the laptop and stood. As I passed the upstairs balcony, I glanced down at the living room. Julian was on the phone now, pacing. Sienna was scrolling her phone, frowning. Neither of them looked up. I walked into the bedroom, shut the door, and locked it, for the first time in a long time. I slept without setting an alarm. I woke up at 6:30 without an alarm. Old habits. I showered, dressed in a charcoal Tomas Meyer suit, and checked my phone before even pouring coffee. 3 missed calls from Julian. 7 texts. The first few were variations of "we need to talk." The later ones dropped the pretense. "What the fuck did you do?" I scrolled past them. There it was, buried under KKR earnings alert, a Bloomberg headline. Whitmore Global shakes as East Division sale rumors swirl. I clicked. The article cited people familiar with the matter and noted a significant liquidity repositioning in WGH's latest SEC disclosure. Marcus had moved faster than I expected. I padded downstairs. Julian was already in the kitchen, still in yesterday's shirt. Hair a mess. Sienna was perched on a stool, wrapped in my robe, scrolling her phone with one hand and stirring a latte with the other. Neither looked up when I walked in. Julian's voice was flat. "You saw the news?" "I saw," I said, reaching for the coffee pot. "You want to tell me what the hell you're playing at?" I poured slowly. "Not playing. Restructuring." Sienna snorted. "Restructuring? That's cute. Babe, tell her no one's buying the East Division. Everyone knows it's the weakest part of the portfolio." I sipped my coffee and looked at her. "Everyone also knows the East Division holds the majority of WGH's voting shares. But thanks for the market analysis." Sienna really adds to the conversation. Julian slammed his palm on the counter. "Cut the shit. Claire, you moved 22% of the liquid assets overnight into an offshore escrow under a shell company I've never heard of, Bennett Shaw Holdings." I said, "You signed the incorporation papers 2 years ago, during the estate planning review. Page 4, paragraph 2. I believe you initialed it." His face went still. That was the look he got when he realized he'd missed something, usually right before a board member lost their job. Sienna frowned. "Wait, what? She can just move money like that?" "She can if she's been planning it for months," Julian said tightly, "which she clearly has." I set my mug down. "I've been planning it since the day I noticed your client dinners didn't match your expense reports. But sure, let's pretend this is sudden." Julian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened. "It's Marcus. He's not answering my calls. He's busy." I said, "So am I. I have a 9 o'clock with Victoria Langford." That got his attention. "You're meeting Langford?" "Without telling me. I'm meeting her as a majority stakeholder in Bennett Shaw Holdings, which, last I checked, doesn't require your permission." Sienna slid off the stool. "Okay, this is getting weird. Julian, are you gonna let her just take over?" Julian didn't answer. He was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time in 10 years. "You've been building this behind my back." "Behind your back" implies deception. I said, "I prefer parallel structuring." His phone buzzed again. This time he answered. "Marcus, where the hell are you?" "What do you mean you're advising her?" "You can't do that. You work for me." No, I don't care about the bylaws. I want those shares back by noon." "Fuck you, Marcus." He hung up and threw the phone onto the counter. "You turned my CFO. I turned a professional who values his reputation." I said, "Marcus knows a sinking ship when he sees one. And he knows I'm the only one who can keep the SEC off his back after your little creative accounting in Q3. Sienna's eyes widened. "Creative accounting? Babe, what's she talking about?" Julian ignored her. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled up the email Marcus had sent at 4 a.m., the one detailing the share transfers and the preliminary buyout offers. I turned the screen toward him. $2 billion on the table. "Julian, from Shaw Equity, and that's before we open the bidding." He stared at the number. I watched the math click behind his eyes, the valuation, the debt load, the fact that he no longer held the cards. Sienna leaned in. $2 billion? For the East Division? That's insane. It's leverage." I said, and it's only the beginning. Julian's voice dropped. You sell that division. You gut the company. I gut your control. I corrected. There's a difference. WGH survives. You don't. He stepped toward me. For a second, I thought he might grab my arm, but he stopped short. You think the board will let this happen? The board will do what the majority shareholder tells them to do, I said, and as of this morning, that's me. Sienna laughed nervously. Okay, this is like a really bad soap opera. Can we not do this before coffee? Neither of us looked at her. Julian's eyes stayed on mine. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was waiting this long. I said, now, if you'll excuse me, I have a car waiting. I grabbed my bag and walked out. Behind me, I heard Sienna's voice rise. Babe? Babe, say something. Are you just gonna let her? The door shut before I heard the rest. The town car was idling at the curb. I slid in, and Marcus was already there. Laptop open. Phone pressed to his ear. Yes, I understand the optics, but the numbers don't lie. If we hold until Wednesday, we've got a bidding war. Right. Keep Langford warm. I'll call you back. He hung up and looked at me. You told him. I didn't have to. I said. The news did. How's the escrow? Closed at 5 a.m. Funds are secure. Shaw's legal team is reviewing the asset schedule now. Langford's people want exclusivity, but I told them we're not locking in until Friday. Good, I said. Leak the Sienna detail to the journal. Casually. Mention she's been in the executive suite, unsupervised. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want to trigger a compliance review? I want Julian distracted. I said, the more time he spends managing PR, the less time he has to block the vote. Marcus nodded and typed a quick note. You realize he'll come after you, personally, not just the company. He can try, I said, but he'll have to explain why his wife, who he's been publicly humiliating, suddenly owns the majority of his voting shares, and why he signed off on it 2 years ago without reading the fine print. Marcus smiled faintly. You've got a mean streak. Claire, I've got a prenup, I said, and a very good memory. We pulled up to the WGH headquarters. I didn't get out immediately. Through the tinted glass, I could see the lobby was already buzzing. Staff huddled in small groups. Phones out. Word travels fast on the street. Ready? Marcus asked. I opened the door. Let's finish this. Inside, the elevator ride up was silent except for the hum of the car. When the doors opened, Julian was waiting. He'd changed into a suit, but his tie was crooked. Sienna was beside him, clutching a designer bag like it was a shield. You've got some nerve, Julian said. Morning to you too, I said, walking past him toward the boardroom. Claire, Sienna started. I stopped and turned. Sienna, you should probably sit this one out. Unless you've suddenly developed expertise in Delaware corporate law. She flushed. Julian put a hand on her arm. Not now. I pushed open the boardroom doors. The table was half full. 3 VPs, the general counsel. 2 outside directors. All of them looked up. Julian followed me in. This is a private meeting. Not anymore, I said, setting my bag on the table. As of 8 a.m., Bennett Shaw Holdings holds 34% of WGH's voting shares. That gives me the right to call a special session, which I just did. General Counsel Alan Pierce cleared his throat. Claire, this is highly irregular. We haven't had time to vet. You've had 3 months. I said, the filings are all there. SEC Form 13D, filed at 7:15 this morning. Check your inbox. Julian stepped forward. This is a coup. It's a correction, I said. One you invited the moment you decided to turn our home into a publicity stunt. Sienna's voice cut in. This is about me? Seriously? You're destroying a multi-billion-dollar company because you're jealous? I looked at her. I'm restructuring a company because its CEO has been diverting resources, falsifying records, and compromising shareholder value. You're just the symptom. Julian's phone rang. He glanced at it, then at me. It's Shaw. Take it, I said. Tell them we'll accept nothing less than 2.4. He stared at me. You've already talked to them? I've already negotiated. I said. You're behind. Julian, you've been behind since you brought her into my house. He answered the call, stepping toward the windows. I turned to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, the resolution is simple. We authorize the sale of the East Division to Shaw Equity, effective Friday. Proceeds will be used to retire debt and stabilize the remaining divisions. Vote will be held Thursday. Alan Pierce looked pale, and if Julian contests this, he can contest all he wants. I said, but the shares don't lie, and neither do the SEC filings. Julian hung up and turned around. His face was blank. Shaw's offering 2.35. Final. Counter at 2.4. I said, they'll blink. You're bluffing. He said, am I? I pulled up the message from Derek Shaw. 2.4 if you close by Friday. No contingencies. I turned the screen toward Julian. He read it, then looked at me. For the first time in our marriage, I saw something close to fear in his eyes. Sienna tugged his sleeve. Babe, what's happening? He shook her off. She's selling the company. Not the company, I said. Just your grip on it. The boardroom was silent. Alan Pierce finally spoke. We'll need a formal vote. You'll get it, I said. Thursday, 9 a.m. And Julian, bring a pen. You'll need to sign the asset transfer authorization. He didn't respond. He just stood there, Sienna hovering at his shoulder. The two of them looking like props in someone else's story. I gathered my things and walked out. Marcus fell into step beside me. You think he'll actually sign? He'll sign, I said, because if he doesn't, I'll release the Q3 audit discrepancies to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then he won't have a company to worry about. Just a cell. Marcus let out a low whistle. You've thought of everything. I've thought of enough. I said, the rest we'll figure out Thursday. We stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Julian standing in the boardroom, staring after me. Sienna was saying something, but he wasn't listening. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. I scheduled the meeting for noon at the Four Seasons private dining room, the one with the soundproof panels and the waiter who knew better than to make small talk. Marcus arrived first, already halfway through a legal pad covered in scratch marks and arrows. I ordered a sparkling water with lime. No alcohol, not yet. Langford's here, Marcus said, glancing at his watch. Shaw's team is 5 minutes out. Good, I said. Let them wait. Victoria Langford didn't knock. She pushed the door open like she owned the place, which, depending on how the next hour went, she might. Late 40s, razor-sharp bob, suit that cost more than most people's cars. She nodded at me, ignored Marcus. Claire, heard you've been busy. Morning. Victoria, take a seat. She's Saturday, crossing her legs. Julian's losing his mind. Called me at 7. Demanded to know if I was colluding with you. I told him I don't collude. I acquire. Smart answer, I said. She smiled thinly. 2.4's my final offer for the East Division. Not a cent more. And I want the voting shares bundled. You'll get the shares, I said. But 2.4 is the opening bid, not the final. Her smile faded. You're running an auction? I'm maximizing shareholder value, I said. Call it what you want. Before she could respond, the door opened again. Derek Shaw walked in with 2 associates. 6'4", custom suit, the kind of handshake that feels like a warning. He nodded at Victoria, then at me. Mrs. Whitmore. Heard you're in charge now. Ms. Bennett. I corrected. And temporarily. Yes. Derek grinned. I like it. Keeps things clean. He sat across from Victoria, his team flanking him. You've seen our offer. 2.4. Victoria said, coolly. I'm aware. Derek looked at me. You play hardball. Claire, I respect that. But let's not waste time. 2.4. All cash. Close in 10 days. 2.6. I said. Silence. Victoria's pen paused mid-scratch. Derek leaned back. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled up the latest Bloomberg snippet on my phone and turned it toward him. WGH stocks down 11% since this morning. Every hour Julian stays in the CEO chair, the value drops. You're not buying assets. You're buying stability. And stability costs more than 2.4. Victoria tapped her pen. 2.5. And I want first refusal on the West Division if you spin it off next quarter. You'll get West Division right of first offer. I said, but not refusal. And only if you go to 2.55. Derek laughed. Christ, you're something else. He looked at his associates. One of them shrugged. The other nodded. Derek turned back to me. 2.55. 10-day close. Voting shares included. And you keep the SEC off our backs during due diligence. Done, I said. But I want a non-refundable deposit of $500 million wired to escrow by 5 p.m. today. Victoria's eyes narrowed. That's aggressive. That's the cost of certainty. I said, take it or walk. She studied me for a long moment, then reached for her phone. I'll match. 2.55. Same terms. Derek didn't hesitate. 2.6. $500 million deposit by 4. Close in 7 days. Victoria's jaw tightened. She looked at Marcus. Is she serious? Marcus didn't look up from his pad. She's never been more serious. Victoria exhaled through her nose. 2.6. But I want a seat on the reconstituted board. Granted. I said. Post-transaction. Non-executive. Derek clapped his hands once. We've got a deal. Pending legal. Obviously. I said. I nodded at Marcus. Send the term sheets. They left within 20 minutes, Victoria stiff. Derek almost cheerful. Marcus waited until the door shut, then let out a breath. You just drove a $200 million swing in 90 minutes. Julian taught me that hesitation costs. I said. Now, leak the revised offer to the journal. Quietly. Make sure they mention Sienna's name in connection with the compliance review. Marcus blinked. You're really going for the kill shot. I'm removing variables. I said. Julian's ego is one. Sienna's mouth is another. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Claire. Julian's voice was low. Controlled. 2.6? You think that's funny? I think it's fair. I said. Given the circumstances. The circumstances are you staging a coup in my own company. Our company. I said. And technically, it's Bennett Shaw's now. You should really read the filings. Julian, you'd save yourself a lot of confusion. He ignored that. Sienna posted a photo from my office this morning. Some intern leaked it to the Post. Now NYSE compliance is sniffing around. Terrible judgment, letting an unauthorized person into a restricted area. I said, almost like someone wanted to get caught. You set her up. I created an environment where her stupidity could shine. I said, there's a difference. He was quiet for a beat. You're enjoying this. I'm resolving a problem. I said, you're welcome to keep making it worse. But I'd advise against it. The SEC doesn't have a sense of humor about ethics violations. I'll sue. You'll try, I said, and you'll lose. Prenup's airtight. So is the share transfer. And the Q3 discrepancies? Those are yours, not mine. I'd focus on your defense. Julian, not your threats. I hung up before he could respond. Marcus looked up from his laptop. Compliance just issued a formal inquiry. They want a full list of everyone who accessed the executive suites in the last 30 days. Send it, I said. Highlight Sienna's visits and Julian's approval emails. Let them draw their own conclusions. You're going to destroy him. I'm clarifying ownership. I said. He destroyed himself. I'm just the one holding the pen. My phone buzzed again. A text from Sienna. You are so dead. Julian says you can't do this. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the text to Marcus. Add this to the exhibit list. Emotional instability. Helps the narrative. Marcus smirked. You're ruthless. I'm prepared. I said, there's a difference. By 4 p.m. The deposit hit the escrow account. Marcus confirmed it with a nod. 500 million. Cleared. Good. I said, draft the board resolution. Vote tomorrow. And make sure Julian gets a copy hand-delivered. I want him to see the signature line. You think he'll sign? He'll sign, I said, because if he doesn't, I'll notify the U.S. Attorney's Office about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. The ones he forgot to mention on his disclosure forms. Marcus whistled. You've been holding that card a long time. I've been holding several. I said, this one just happens to be nuclear. I stood, gathered my things. I'm heading to the office. I want to be there when the board gets the news. Need me to come? No, I said. Let Julian stew. He's more useful when he's panicked. The elevator ride down was quiet. In the lobby, a handful of employees glanced up as I passed. No one said hello. No one met my eye. Good. Fear keeps people honest. I spent the next 2 hours in my temporary office, the one Julian had generously offered me when I took a leave 6 months ago. It still had my nameplate on the door. I reviewed the final term sheet, made 2 minor edits, and sent it to Marcus for filing. At 6:30, my phone rang. Julian, you've got until midnight to reverse the escrow, he said. Or what? Or I go public with everything. The prenup, the shell company, the fact that you've been planning this since before Sienna even existed. Go ahead, I said. Every document is time-stamped. Every signature is yours. You'll implicate yourself before you touch me. He was quiet. Then you've changed. I've had good reason. I said, now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board vote to prepare for. Try to get some sleep. Julian, you look like hell. I hung up and leaned back. Outside, the sun was setting. Somewhere in the city, Sienna was probably posting another selfie, oblivious to the fact that her 15 minutes were ticking down. Julian was probably drinking, or yelling, or both. I opened my laptop and pulled up the shareholder list. 34% and climbing. By this time tomorrow, it would be done. The company would survive. Julian wouldn't. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Marcus. Board packet delivered. Julian's secretary cried, "See you at 9. I smiled. Let him laugh tonight. Tomorrow, the laughter would stop. I got to the office at 7. Marcus was already camped out in the conference room with 2 paralegals and a catered tray of black coffee. He didn't look up when I walked in. Proxy votes are still coming in. He said, we're sitting at 41% committed. Another 6 in play. Lock the 6. I said, call Hansen at Vanguard. Tell him if he flips now, I'll personally recommend him for the audit committee. If he doesn't, I'll make sure his name's on every subpoena the SEC issues this year. Marcus nodded and stepped into the hall to dial. I opened my laptop and scanned the live feed from the exchange. WGH was down another 4% in pre-market. Julian's name was trending on FinTwit. Mostly variations of what the hell is happening at Whitmore. My phone buzzed. Julian. Again. I answered on the second ring. You're really doing this? He said. Not a question. I'm finishing it. I said. The board won't back you. Half of them owe me favors. Half of them owe me silence. I said. And the other half owe you indictments. Pick which group you think shows up today. He was quiet for a beat. Sienna's outside. She wants to come in. Tell her to enjoy the sidewalk. I said, last I checked. She's not on the shareholder registry. You're enjoying this. He said again. I'm correcting a balance sheet. I said, and a marriage. Same process, different column. I hung up and turned to Marcus as he came back in. Hansen's in? He's in. Marcus said, 47% now. We're over the line. Good. I said, start the meeting at 9 sharp. No delays. And make sure Julian's name is called last on the roll. At 8:50, the boardroom began to fill. Independent directors, institutional reps, two guys from legal. Julian showed up at 8:58, suit pressed, face neutral. Sienna was behind him in a coat that probably cost more than her rent, trying to slip past security. Miss Vance isn't on the list. The guard said. Julian turned. She's with me. Not today. I said, not looking up from my notes. Section 4. Paragraph 12 of the bylaws. Only name stakeholders and authorized observers in the room during a vote. She's neither. Sienna's mouth opened. Are you serious? Julian, she stays out. Julian said quietly. To me. He added. You'll pay for this. I'm counting on it. I said. The meeting started exactly at 9. Alan Pierce, the general counsel, cleared his throat and began reading the agenda. I tuned him out. I'd read it 3 times last night. When he got to Resolution 14B, authorizing the sale of the East Division and related asset transfers, I stood. Before we vote, I said, I'd like to enter Exhibit C into the record. Internal audit findings dated October 3rd. Discrepancies in Q3 expense allocations tied to offshore entities not disclosed to the board. Julian's head snapped up. Objection. That's privileged information. Not when it affects shareholder value, I said, and not when the CEO failed to disclose material risk factors to the audit committee. Page 3, paragraph 4. Your signature. Julian. Alan looked like he might be sick. We'll need to review, no time. I said, the buyers close at 5. We vote now, or we breach contract and face a $2 billion penalty. I assume no one wants that. Victoria Langford, seated near the middle, spoke up. I've reviewed the asset schedule. The numbers are solid. I'm voting yes. Derek Shaw's proxy holder nodded. Shaw Equity concurs. 1 by 1. The votes came in. Yes, yes, yes. Julian sat motionless, staring at the table. When Alan got to him, his voice was flat. No. Noted. I said, roll call complete. Motion carries. 17-1. Resolution 14B is adopted. Julian stood. This isn't over. It is for you. I said, Alan, please distribute the second resolution, removing Julian Whitmore as CEO effective immediately, appointing me as interim chair pending the post-merger transition. The room went dead silent. Julian's chair scraped back. You don't have the votes for that. I have 49%, I said, and a fiduciary duty to prevent further harm to the company, which, according to Exhibit C, you've already caused. Any objections? No one spoke. Alan cleared his throat. Resolution carries. Ms. Bennett, your interim chair. Julian looked around the table. No one met his eyes. Sienna's voice drifted in from the hallway loud. Sharp. Babe, what's happening? Why won't they let me in? Julian turned toward the door. I stepped in front of him. Security will escort you out. I said, quietly, if you prefer, loudly, if you insist. He leaned in, voice low. You'll regret this. I regretted marrying you. I said, everything since has been profit. I nodded to the guard by the door. 2 men stepped in. Julian didn't resist. He walked out, shoulders straight, face blank. As he passed the glass wall, Sienna rushed toward him. Phone out. Recording. The guard gently steered her back. She tried to push past, and for a second, it looked like she might make it. Then Julian shook his head, sharp, and kept walking. A reporter from CNBC shouted from the lobby, Mr. Whitmore, any comment on the leadership change? Julian didn't answer. He kept walking, head down, toward the elevators. Sienna's voice rose behind him. Julian, wait, what about us? What about the penthouse? The elevator doors closed. She turned, phone still raised, and caught sight of me through the glass. Her expression shifted confusion, then anger, then something close to panic. I gave her a small, Polite nod and turned back to the boardroom. Marcus was already on the phone with the transfer agent, confirming the share re-registration. Yes. Effective immediately. Bennett Shaw as majority holder, correct. I walked to the podium. A cluster of reporters had gathered just beyond the velvet rope. One called out, "Mrs. Whitmore, what happens to your husband now?" I adjusted the mic. Mr. Whitmore will have ample opportunity to reflect on his choices, preferably from whatever size penthouse he can still afford. Laughter rippled through the room. I didn't smile. I stepped down and walked back to the conference room. Marcus was waiting. SEC just confirmed the filing. He said, "East Division's officially marked for sale. Shaw's wire hits tomorrow." "Good," I said. "Draft the press release. Emphasize continuity, stability, and renewed focus on shareholder value. And add a line about enhanced compliance protocols. You want to rub it in. I want it documented." I said, "If Julian tries to sue, I want a paper trail thick enough to choke a horse." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Claire." Julian's voice was rough. "You've made a mistake." "I've made several," I said. "Marrying you was the first. Waiting this long to fix it was the second. Today wasn't a mistake. I'll fight the vote." "You'll lose," I said. "The shares are locked. The board's aligned. And the SEC has a copy of Exhibit C. You'd be smarter to focus on your defense." "You think you've won," he said. "I think I've finished." I said, "There's a difference." I hung up. Marcus looked up from his screen. "He'll go to the press next." "Let him," I said. "Every interview he gives reminds people why he's not in charge anymore. Sienna will tag along. And every post she makes is another ethics violation. We'll use it all. You're not worried about the backlash?" "I'm worried about the balance sheet," I said. "And right now, it's looking very healthy." By noon, the press release was live. By 1, WGH stock had clawed back 6%. By 3, I'd fielded calls from 3 major outlets and declined all of them. By 4, Marcus had confirmed the final transfer of voting shares. Bennett Shaw Holdings now controlled 51% of WGH. I left the office at 5. In the elevator, I checked my phone. Sienna had posted a video, shaky, tearful, filmed in what looked like a hotel lobby. "Julian and I are taking some space," she said, "but we're stronger than ever. #love wins." I deleted the app. Outside, the air was cool. A town car idled at the curb. I slid in. Marcus was already there, closing his laptop. "First day as chair," he said. "Interim." I corrected. "And only until the merger closes." "Still," he said. "Feels historic. Feels necessary." I said, "What's the status on the lawsuit?" "Julian filed this afternoon. Wrongful termination. Defamation. The usual. But his attorney already asked about a settlement." "No settlement," I said. "We litigate. Every discovery request. Every deposition. Every document dump. We bury him in it. And if he tries to hide assets, we notify the IRS." Marcus grinned. "You're not kidding." "I never kid about taxes," I said. We rode in silence for a few blocks. Then Marcus said, "You think he'll bounce back?" "I think he'll spend the next year explaining why his wife owns his company," I said. "And the year after that explaining why his Instagram girlfriend's testimony sank his defense. By the time he's done, Whitmore will be a punchline. And Bennett? Bennett Shaw will be a brand," I said. "One built on competence, not ego. One that doesn't need a scandal to stay relevant." Marcus nodded. "You've thought this through." "I've thought it through since the first time I saw a charge from a hotel I'd never stayed in," I said. "Today just happened to be the day I acted on it." We pulled up to my building. I stepped out, then leaned back in. "Marcus, schedule the shareholders' meeting for next month. I want Sienna's name on the guest list. Front row." He smiled. "Already done." I walked into the lobby, nodded at the doorman, and took the elevator up. The penthouse was quiet. No laughter. No champagne flutes. Just silence and the faint hum of a city that had shifted slightly on its axis. I poured a glass of water, opened my laptop, and scanned the evening headlines. Whitmore Global Reboots under new leadership. Claire Bennett takes control in stunning boardroom coup. What's next for ousted CEO Julian Whitmore? I closed the laptop. Tomorrow, the work would start, integrating the East Division, stabilizing operations, building something that lasted. But tonight, I allowed myself one small thing. I didn't set an alarm. 6 months to the day, I got the Forbes alert at 6 a.m. Claire Bennett lands number 37 on America's most influential women in finance. I didn't frame it. I screenshot it and sent it to Marcus with one word. Finally, he texted back. Conference room at 9. Langford wants a debrief before the Shaw integration close. I replied, tell her to bring coffee. Black. The penthouse felt different now. I'd had the east wing repainted, swapped out the sectional for something lower, darker, less Julian. Sienna's champagne flutes were long gone, donated to a charity auction where they'd sold for $300 a pair. I kept the baccarat. Petty, maybe, but satisfying. I walked into Bennett Shaw Capital's new offices at 8:40. We'd rebranded 3 weeks ago. New logo, new letterhead, new silence in the halls. People didn't whisper when I passed anymore. They nodded. Progress. Marcus was already in the conference room with Victoria Langford. She looked pleased with herself, which usually meant the numbers were good. Claire, she said, Shaw's team signed off on the final asset schedule last night. Integration's on track. We're looking at a 12% ROE by Q3, assuming the East Division doesn't hemorrhage talent. I said, sliding into my chair. They won't. Marcus said, we kept the comp structure intact. And the new incentive plan hits next week. Turnovers at 4%, better than forecast. Victoria sipped her coffee. You've built something solid here. Whitmore Global would have collapsed inside a year if you hadn't moved. Whitmore Global did collapse. I said, we just recycled the parts. She smiled. Fair enough. What about Julian? Julian's consulting for a mid-tier firm in Parsippany. I said, Meridian Strategies. Small office. Big parking lot. Zero media profile. Last I heard, he was pitching to regional credit unions. Marcus looked up from his laptop. He tried to sue again last month. Wrongful dilution of shareholder value. His attorney withdrew within a week. Why? Victoria asked. Because we filed a counterclaim for breach of fiduciary duty tied to the Cayman accounts. I said, and because the SEC quietly informed his counsel that an investigation was ongoing. Nothing motivates a settlement like a grand jury subpoena. Victoria leaned back. And Sienna? Ghosted. I said, last Instagram post was 3 months ago, a blurry selfie from a rooftop bar in Miami. Caption, new beginnings. Since then, nothing. Rumor is she tried to shop a tell-all to Page 6. No one bought it. Marcus smirked. Turns out, my boyfriend's wife took his company isn't a compelling narrative when the wife is more interesting than the girlfriend. Speak of the devil, Victoria said, nodding at my phone. It buzzed with an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, please talk. I opened it. 3 sentences. Claire, I've made mistakes. I'd like to meet. No lawyers. Just us. I closed it, deleted it, emptied the trash. Julian? Marcus asked. Julian. I confirmed. Victoria raised an eyebrow. You're not curious? I'm expensive. I said. Curiosity's a luxury I bill by the hour. He's not on the retainer. We moved through the rest of the agenda. Debt refinancing. The London expansion. The new fintech partnership. By 10:30, Victoria was gone. Marcus stayed behind. You ever think about what's next? He asked. Next is Q2 earnings. I said. Then the Langford Capital Board seat. Then the Shaw earn out. Then, I mean personally. He said. I looked at him. Personal is a subset of professional. Marcus, you know that. He held up his hands. Just asking. You've been running on spite for 6 months, wondering if you've got anything left in the tank besides it. I stood, gathered my things. I've got discipline. That's better. Spite burns out. Discipline compounds. He didn't argue. We walked out together. In the elevator, he said, Victoria's hosting a thing tonight. Rooftop at the Beekman. She said to bring you. I'll be there. I said, remind her I don't do small talk. I'll remind her you don't do anything but winning. I smiled. First one all day. The party was exactly what you'd expect. Open bar. Skyline view. Too many people, pretending they weren't networking. Victoria spotted me the second I walked in. She handed me a drink without asking. Champagne. She said, You've earned it. I've earned silence. I said, but I took the glass. We stood near the edge. Below us, the city pulsed. Someone from Bloomberg wandered over, tried to pitch a profile. I gave him a 5-second soundbite about operational resilience and sent him on his way. Victoria laughed. You're terrifying when you're concise. I'm terrifying when I'm bored. I said. A younger associate from Langford Capital drifted over. Early 30s. Nervous. Hungry. Ms. Bennett? Huge fan. I just wanted to ask, do you ever miss it? The Whitmore name? I sipped the champagne. I miss the company, not the man. There's a difference. Right. He said. Of course. It's just what you did, taking over like that. It's legendary. But doesn't it get lonely? I looked at him. Lonely is sitting in a boardroom, watching your CEO lie to your face while his mistress wears your bathrobe. Lonely is signing prenups you hope you never need. Lonely is waking up at 3 a.m., wondering if you're the only one who notices the numbers don't add up. I gestured at the skyline. This is peace. He nodded quickly and backed off. Victoria grinned. You scared him. I educated him. I said. She clinked her glass against mine. To peace. Then, to discipline. I corrected. We drank. Over her shoulder. I saw a familiar silhouette near the bar, tall. Expensive suit. Posture that screamed used to be important. Julian. Alone. He didn't see me at first. Then he did. Our eyes met for half a second. He looked away. Victoria followed my gaze. You want me to have him removed? No. I said, let him stand there. Let him remember what relevance tastes like. She nodded. Cold. Clear. I said. Julian didn't approach. He finished his drink, set the glass down, and walked toward the elevators. No dramatic exit. No parting shot. Just gone. Like the last 6 months had been along. Slow fade out. Sienna wasn't there. I checked my phone later. Her Instagram was private now. Last post dated 2 weeks ago. A mirror selfie in a hotel bathroom. No caption. The comments were turned off. I slipped the phone back into my bag. Victoria was talking to someone from the Federal. I stayed by the edge, watching the lights. A waiter passed with a tray of canapes. I took one, not because I was hungry, but because it gave my hand something to do. Ms. Bennett? A woman's voice. Mid-40s. Polished. Unfamiliar. I'm Rebecca Stein, from the Wall Street Journal. I've been meaning to ask, off the record, what's the one thing you'd tell someone in your position 6 months ago? I chewed, swallowed, thought about it. Don't wait for permission to protect what's yours. And don't confuse noise with power. Julian laughed loud. Sienna posted often. Neither of them mattered once the votes were counted. She nodded, scribbled nothing down. Thank you. I turned back to the skyline. Somewhere out there, Julian was probably in an Uber, heading back to whatever apartment he could afford. Sienna was probably scrolling, wondering why the invite stopped. And me? I was exactly where I'd planned to be, standing above it, watching the city hum. My name on the door, my fingerprints on the future. Victoria rejoined me. Ready to go? Whenever you are, I said. We walked to the elevator. Inside, she said, you know, most people would have settled. took the money, stayed quiet. Most people aren't me, I said. The doors opened. We stepped into the lobby. I didn't look back at the rooftop, at the laughter, at the party still going on without me. I didn't need to. The laughter had ended a long time ago for them. Anyway, mine had just begun. Outside, the air was cool. A car idled at the curb. I slid in, smoothed my skirt, and checked my calendar. 9 a.m. meeting with the London team. 11 a.m. call with the SEC liaison. 1 p.m. lunch with the new head of compliance. Marcus texted, Q2 projections look strong. Shaw's team is impressed. Also, Julian's lawyer called. They want to discuss a mutual non-disparagement agreement. I typed back, tell them to define mutual, and raise the confidentiality premium by 20%. If he wants silence, he pays for it. I hit send and leaned back. The car moved through the city, past the buildings, past the history, past the version of me that had once sat in a penthouse and pretended not to notice the lies. That woman was gone. This one owned the street. My phone buzzed one last time. An email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject, regret. I deleted it without reading. Some words don't deserve the oxygen. I looked out the window as Manhattan blurred past. Somewhere, a new headline was being written. Somewhere, a new deal was being struck. Somewhere, someone was making the mistake of underestimating the wrong woman. Not my problem. Not anymore. I closed my eyes and let the city carry me forward.